This is Crested Butte real estate agent Frank Constello with the Crested Butte is Home podcast. And on this episode, my guest and I begin by talking about Crested Butte heliskiing. Not that many people know this, but in the late 70s and early 80s, you could go heliskiing from Crested Butte, and my guest was one of the lead guides. And then we switched to his current career, which is fighting fires from the air for the state of Colorado. And we recorded this originally in early October of 2020, and since then, the Cameron Peak Fire exploded and is now Colorado's largest at over 200,000 acres. And the East Troublesome Fire wasn't even on fire when we recorded this, but it's since grown to also be one of Colorado's largest ever and is threatening Rocky Mountain National Park from both sides. And hopefully they all do okay and we get some snow and better weather really soon. And these acreage numbers are just crazy when you think about it. That Cameron Peak Fire, for instance, that's about 130 or so Crested Butte Mountain resorts in terms of how many acres it is. That's just crazy to think about. Anyway, please welcome Craig Hall to the podcast. Today on the Crested Butte is Home podcast, my guest is Craig Hall. So Craig, start by telling me a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Well, I grew up in southeastern Colorado. I grew up in a little town of La Junta, and my dad was from Denver and was in the military, and then he got transferred to La Junta where he met my mother, and grew up in La Junta. And then moved to Pueblo in high school, but my family always did vacations in the Gunnison Valley, and we fished on the Taylor and did a lot of vacations in the Gunnison area. So I always loved it and wanted to come to the mountains as soon as I could. And I finished college and went to Colorado State University and graduated there, and then moved to Crested Butte after that. I spent one winter right after I graduated skiing Aspen for a winter, and then I moved to Crested Butte the next summer. So that's kind of a little of my background.
Gotcha. Do you know Gary Pearson from Western? He's from La Junta as well. Someone else I interviewed.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Wouldn't necessarily guess that two people from ended up here, but that's cool.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Just one quick aside to that is Donna Rosman, who lives in town, who has spent a lot of time in town. She was my next door neighbor, and her sister, Teresa Reichs, who owned the Reichs Family Gallery. We've known each other since we were, babies, and all three of us ended up here along with Dietrich, who runs the. We used to work for CB South.
Rask, right?
Well, his dad grew up in La Junta as well.
Oh, okay.
So there's some more people from La Junta that ended up.
Oh, who knows? What did you study there at CSU?
I was a biology major. It was pretty general major, and at that time after I graduated, there wasn't very many jobs, so I decided to see the mountains for a while and kind of never left. However, when I did get a permanent job with the Forest Service, it, having a degree helped get that, so yeah. I guess it helped a little bit.
So growing up in La Junta, you said you did come up here and do some fishing and stuff. What else? Did you grow up skiing as well, or?
Yes, I did. That family, like Teresa Reichs and Donna Rosman, they grew up they had a big family with 7 kids, and they were my next door neighbors. I practically lived at their house. Well, anyway, their dad bought a cabin in Cuchara, up at the base of the Spanish Peaks, and so they had a little ski area up there. And so probably when I was like 8 or something, Teresa's brother was one of my best friends, and we had a pair of skis that you could put your like hiking boots into, and so he would go like 20 yards down the slope and crash, and then I'd run down, and obviously there wasn't a ton of snow there, but I'd go down and I'd put them on and go like 20 yards and crash, and that's kind of how we started skiing, and I fell in love with it. And then plus around the cabins in Kachara, there was hardly anybody there in those days. And so you could just ski around and kind of cross country ski around the cabins and along the creek. And so I kind of fell in love with cross country skiing too. I just love the snow. Kept skiing all my life.
Yeah. I heard there's a nonprofit that bought the base area of Kuchara, and they're kind of trying to maybe bring it back in some way, shape, or form. It might be backcountry only, and all these things could be really cool. But,
right. Yeah. And where I originally skied was at a different, they had a ski area a little bit higher on the ridge, probably even, I don't know, 5 miles from where the one is now. And then They disbanded that and started the one that you're talking about.
Yeah. So what'd you do when you first got here for work? You said that, there weren't jobs necessarily in your degree, but what'd you do when you first got to Crested Butte?
Kind of like everybody in the early 70s, I did whatever I could to make ends meet, and live fairly, tried to live as inexpensive as I could, and I would do whatever I could. And then Crested Butte had a Crested Butte Hot Shots. They had a little firefighting crew that I joined. And so I fought fires in the summer. And in the winter, I did, what a lot of people do, worked in restaurants and whatever I could do so I could ski every day. And so I got involved with the Hot Shots, and that, that was pretty good. We'd go out and work on fires and make some pretty good money and be able to stay in Crested Butte. So that's kind of where I got my firefighting background. And then I was in the building business and did some construction and got involved with a guy came to town, and I was doing a lot of backcountry skiing. Mainly, nothing real, in those days you couldn't go anything real steep, but we did quite a bit. And then a guy came to town and wanted to start a helicopter skiing business. And so that's how I got involved with helicopter skiing, as they kind of looked for, he didn't know anybody in town, and he hired a guide from Jackson Hole that was on ski patrol in Jackson Hole. And so they were just exploring the region and wanted to, the area, and wanted to do a helicopter skiing. So they got a couple of us who, they kind of said, well, who knows the backcountry and who's been skiing, and, skiers. And so my name came up, and along with a couple others. And so we kind of had an informal tryout, and I got a job as a guide with the helicopter skiing, and kind of went from there. But when we first started doing the helicopter skiing, it was really fun because we were exploring. I wasn't making much money, but we were exploring different areas to do the program, and different areas where to ski. And so that was really great. We went from Carbon to Brush Creek to Whetstone. We went quite a few different places, and we kind of figured out that most of the snow was up north of town.
Yeah.
And a deeper snowpack was a little more stable snowpack, and it wasn't quite as weak as and shallow as, say, Whetstone, Carbon, Brush Creek, those areas. And we kind of zoned in on the Opie Joyful area, Baldy, and those areas at first. And then, as the business continued, we wanted to get a few more people from Aspen and a few more people skiing and bigger vertical. So we moved up to Treasury Mountain and Treasure Mountain, Bear Basin, and those areas. And we actually moved the operation over to Marble, and would get people from Aspen to come into Marble. So that's kind of how the business progressed a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get back to the First Tracks Heliskiing, but did want to kind of go back. So, you started backcountry skiing. I believe this is telemark, and I think I've seen it in a couple places. You're one of the handful of people kind of credited with bringing back the telemark turns. So talk about that, how that occurred.
Well, there was a handful of people, and I think, Rick Borkvik was one of the first ones, and Doug Bazell. They went to Western and were really good skiers, and they I think Rick Borkvik's kind of credited for really bringing it back. He looked at I think he looked at a Booker magazine and saw the turn and started, there's probably some other people in the United States that started doing that as well about the same time, but I think he was definitely one of the first ones. And so it started using that turn, and we would go up to places like Coney's and ski Coney's, and we had, really skinny little skis. And, I started on Bona wooden skis with the lignostone edge. And, but we would use those and they worked pretty good. And, in those days we used avalanche cords. We didn't know a whole lot about avalanches, but we did have the cord you would drag behind you. But, our basic, avalanche mitigation was, staying away from, really hardcore avalanche slopes.
Yeah.
Looking up at Coney's, we'd kind of ski in the trees. And, as we skied a little more, we'd venture out. And, as we looked at the snowpack, we'd venture out a little bit more and ski more out into the open. But, it's not like today where they're skiing a little bit more hardcore runs and things, but they've got a lot better equipment too.
Right.
And plus we didn't have snowmobiles, so you'd have to go to the trailhead and ski all the way up to the base of the mountain. But we did get some skins, military type skins, and use those to skin up. And that's kind of where, in my opinion, that's where telemarking at the ski area started, is, because we wanted to get better and more proficient telemarking in the powder and in the backcountry, we would practice at the ski area to get better. And so that's kind of where a lot of I think telemark skiing started. And I always loved alpine skis, so I didn't just start out telemarking and totally telemark every day, but I would alpine ski too. But I love that as well.
Yeah.
But I think that's where a lot of us started.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned Coney's, which is, these days at least, is a pretty moderate run up Washington Gulch. In the springtime, would you guys go do like Red Lady or any of the bigger peaks or?
Yeah, and even in the winter we would do that every now and then, But it was mainly spring skiing. Yeah, it was definitely more spring skiing and more corn snow. And we would ski Coney's, and we would ski up on we'd ski Augusta a lot. For probably about 20 years I skied Augusta on my birthday, which was July 2nd. So we would go up there even, in the early summer as well, and ski those. We'd ski Baldy early in the year too, when you could still drive up there. We'd ski that north side of Baldy. Yeah. And in Purple, we'd drive up there, Bear Basin, or I can't think of the name of the basin. When you get up to Schofield Pass, there's a basin up to the left there that used to be private. I think you can get up there now.
North Pole?
Yeah, North Pole. We'd go up to North Pole Basin as well.
Nice. Very cool.
So, yeah, but a lot of the spring skiing was safer, but it was still really fun, and you could do it on your small telemark skis. So that was I think the highlight of telemark skiing was corn snow.
So like you mentioned, that kind of led you to work as a heli ski guide. And you kind of talked about, so the first little bit, you guys just got to go around and try to figure out the best areas. But how long was that running in Crested Butte? And this was like what, 1970s, late 70s?
Yeah, it was probably, I think it was, there was a bad snow year, 76, 77. It was right after that, 78. And we went through probably 83. So it was only like 5 or 6 years there that we did it. And, there was one guy that had the money behind it, but he never did make any money. It was just a tough business in the Colorado Rockies, because first of all, you try to get a helicopter company to commit to you all winter long. And then they didn't know how much they were going to fly, and the snowpack, it was definitely snowpack dependence. And, so it was definitely a tough business. I'm kind of lucky I made it out of there alive and in one piece, because in those days, there wasn't a lot of literature on backcountry skiing. Not a lot of the avalanche science was still just starting to get going. But so a lot of it was kind of by the seat of your pants. And but we did have some, when everything went right and everything was good, we had some wonderful runs, but it was definitely a little challenging for sure, because you were skiing above timberline. We didn't have the big Canadian Rockies where you could ski in the trees when the weather was bad. And so it was mainly, the high alpine skiing that we would do.
Do you think it would fare any better today with all the better gear, or would it be even worse because there's so many other people in the backcountry anyway?
Well, I think in those days, we didn't get too much negative criticism for noise, because nobody was out there. So I think now you would get a little bit of negative criticism. And I still think, you know how it is early in the season. It's really, dicey. You get those early first snows, and then it sits there for a long time. So you have a lot of temperature gradient snow, and then you get the big snows on it, and you get some big avalanches. So I think even in these days, it would be a tough business. And finding the good areas, I think a lot of that area that we skied up Treasury and Treasure are wilderness now, and we can even go there.
Right.
So I think it'd be a pretty tough business in Colorado. I know they still do it in, Telluride a little bit in Silverton. But I don't think in my opinion, they can't make a lot of money doing it because there's just not that many days. And then we would also run into problems with skiing out our terrain. You'd ski it with, 7 to 14 people, and, you can put a lot of tracks in. And then, and what would happen too a lot is you'd get the really good powder, and then all of a sudden after the storm, those winds would shift, and you'd get those winds out of the north, and they would really kind of scour some of your slopes too. So, so it was, that was tough as well.
Well, I know we've spoken about this a little bit before, and you had a couple good stories. So why don't you tell me at least one of the stories about some of the interesting clients, especially up in Aspen?
Well, one time we did, we skied with some Saudi Arabian prince, and we actually flew over there and landed in his front parking area. And, in those days, I had no idea the background, or I didn't really know the politics of the Saudi Arabian prince. And, I've actually thought about it recently and thought, I wonder what happened to that guy, because I know there's been some infighting and some politics going on where one guy took over and the other guy's dead. So I'd like to know a little bit of history of the guys I took, but I have no idea what their names were or anything.
Yeah.
And then I used to take some guys from Aspen that were drug dealers, and the main guy would come, Steve Grabow. He would come with like 10 of his buddies. And in those days, it was the early 80s. They'd have Jeep Wagoneers with tinted windows and drive up, and he paid me cash at the end of the day. And I took him, I don't know, a number of times. And then I read that in a paper where he got arrested. And then when he was out on bail, he was working out at the Aspen Club and went into his car, and a pipe bomb blew up and killed him. And since then, and I didn't even know that much about it. There's no internet then or anything, so you don't hear anything. But since then, I've Googled him, and I read some some of the Aspen Times articles about him, and he was actually pretty well liked in Aspen, and kind of the Robin Hood of Aspen, where he did some good deals and was, and I don't know, people liked him.
Yeah, spreading his cash around. Sounds like so. That's good. Well. In the Crested Butte Real Estate Minute, I've mentioned this a few times, but right now is a great time to sell. And before you put your home or condo on the market, you might want to consider doing a few things. Here are just a few that I will mention. Remove knickknacks and clutter. Anything to make your spaces feel larger is a really good idea. If you have any small nagging issues in the home, maybe just a slow dripping faucet or something like that, go ahead and get that fixed. Paint. If you've got some neon green and hot pink walls, it might be worth your while to go ahead and paint that in a more neutral color. Window washing. If you've got $1 million views but your windows are all dirty, I think that's also money well spent. And those are just a few ideas that I had off the top of my head. If you want to discuss those further, my name is Frank Consella, and you can visit my website, crested-butte-realestateagent.com, or you can just call me at 970-596-7990, and we can talk about selling your home here in Crested Butte or in Gunnison. Let's get back to the interview. Well, let's switch subjects, and you've taken some of this time spent up in the air in helicopters, along with, you mentioned being in hot shots, and it kind of ended up being a forest career for you. So tell me about that. What do you do?
Yeah, I told you I was building houses, and I wasn't the owner of the company, and I was just a framer, carpenter, and that wasn't my passion. I didn't grow up being a skilled woodsman, doing skilled making cabinets or anything. So it really wasn't my passion. It was just something that I did because that was the job that was available there. But I really did not like it because I didn't feel I was that skilled at it. I could do it. I was young and I was tough and I could do it, but I didn't like it that much. And I kind of was like, what am I going to do? I gotta do something different. And I actually called a friend of mine who kind of stayed after Crested Butte Hotshots, stayed fighting fires, and got a job with the BLM, and he knew a little bit about it. He goes, well, Craig, you should put a application in and see if you can get a job. You've got helicopter experience, you've got fire experience. There's some helicopter crews that need skilled people, and should try to get a job doing that. And so I got a job as a helicopter manager, where I kind of supervise a firefighting helicopter. We used it kind of like a fire engine. We'd get a firefight, we'd get a call, and we'd fly out in the helicopter, drop people off, and we'd put a bucket on the helicopter and put the fires out. And then sometimes on bigger fires, you'd go more into support, where you take food and water and a lot of gear into the fires for the fire people. And so that was my main career, and I did that for over 20 years. And I was fortunate. I had to take a job in Nevada. I worked in Carson City, Nevada, and worked the Tahoe area and all of Nevada. But it allowed me to get a permanent job, where there wasn't very many permanent jobs in Colorado. And then after I got that permanent job, I moved back to Colorado and worked with a helicopter crew out of Durango. And all the time, I kind of kept a little home base out of Crested Butte, and I would come whenever I had spare time. I would come back to Crested Butte. So, my whole career, I've had to travel quite a bit, but I've always, kind of kept a home base out of Crested Butte. And I don't know, the first time I took off in a helicopter, and I don't know, we went from Nevada to the Gila forest in southern New Mexico, and I was so excited because I go, I'm getting paid for it, and I love it. And my last job actually doing construction work was at the Treasury Center, and we had a bunch of big blue lambs we had to put up on the Treasury Center, and if you fell off of there, you'd go down all the way to the bottom floor. And I was going, this is, not saying that firefighting isn't dangerous, but I was like, I didn't like it, and it was dangerous. So
yeah.
I was so happy to be out of the construction business, actually, and doing firefighting work. I really liked it, and so I did that for over 20 years, and then they had a mandatory retirement, and so I had to retire from that, and then I would do fires part time, and then it wasn't quite enough work for me. I still had a daughter in school, and I said I need to do I need to continue working, and so I saw this job opening that the state of Colorado had a couple of planes that the legislature authorized to buy a couple planes for. They'd use them to find fires before they got big, and so we have these high-tech cameras in our planes that we use to find fires with the infrared. We can map fires, we can take videos, we can take pictures, we can kind of do overwatch and help the firefighters on the ground. And the reason they funded those planes was because a lot of the big fires, like 10 years ago or so, were what they call holdover fires, and they would be lightning strikes that would kind of smolder for 4 or 5 days, and nobody could find them. And then all of a sudden, the humidity and the wind and the temperature would come up, and these fires would really get going, and they burned a lot of houses. So they said, well, we need to do something a little bit better and find fires. So that's kind of the genesis of how they funded these helicopters, and these aircraft. They're 2 Swiss-made Pilatus aircraft. And so, even this summer, we found probably over 100 fires that nobody knew about, and so we've kept them from getting big. We can just scan probably 6 to 10 miles outside on each side of the plane. We can scan, and if we see a heat source, we can zoom in and check it out with the color and see if it really is a fire, and then report it and get people, engines or people on the ground to get to those fires. We can give them coordinates. And
how can you tell, that it isn't a campfire versus a smoldering log or whatever?
Yeah, you really can't. And so until you put the color camera on it. So you use the IR, and then you can switch to the color camera and zoom in and see people sitting around a campfire.
Okay.
And then you don't call them in. But we're flying 10,000 feet above the ground, and you can spot those fires. And just like a few days ago, I was on this fire up in southern Wyoming and northern Colorado. That's the Mullen fire that's really been going, and they had a spot get really hot and spot it over the road. They were using the road as a boundary and as a barrier, and it spotted over the road, and we could zoom in on that fire and tell them exactly where the spots were. And you can zoom in really closely on it and give them coordinates, and they're really accurate. If you put it in your GPS, you can walk right to that fire. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, the guy on the ground was saying, oh man, that's amazing. Those guys can find it from 10,000, he said 20,000 feet, and we were flying at 25,000. I came on the radio and I said 25,000. He started laughing, but it is pretty amazing technology. So it's great to give situational awareness to fire managers. You can be sitting in your office, and all of a sudden you can get these images, pictures, and perimeters of fires. And it allows the fire managers to get to just make better decisions on how they want to fight the fires, how many people to put on the fires, and it's a great tool. And I've been doing it for 6 years now, and we've kind of proven that it's a successful program. And people throughout the state of Colorado use us. And since we have 2 planes, we one of them is in California at this time. The state of Colorado will allow one plane to leave as long as we keep one here to cover the fires that are here. So they're helping out the people in California at this time. That's and we've been all the way from Florida to Alaska with the planes. So,
wow.
It's just great technology. So we try to keep them busy, and we try to help out people and help the firefighters.
Are you on these planes at this point, or is this just getting beamed into your office these days?
No, they do have drones that can do similar things with the cameras, big drones. But no, we actually operate. We sit in the planes. We have two operators and one pilot, and then you've got a hand controller that you can control the camera with them. So I think what makes our program stand out a little bit is we have firefighters on the plane, because we're all trained firefighters, and so we can give them really good intelligence, and we can give them really good information on what the fire is doing, and do it in kind of the firefighting lingo, and they know that we've been on the ground, and they know what we're talking about, because the government has the military has a plane kind of similar to ours, but they're just military guys on there, and they're not trained in firefighting. So
sure,
they have a little bit of tough time kind of telling the people on the ground what's going on. So I think that's what will make our program stay viable, is we do use firefighters in the planes as opposed to drones. The drones can get a lot of really good pictures, images, and videos, but they can't communicate down to the ground like we do.
So what, I got a couple questions. You mentioned, you saw a lot of fires, small ones. Now you always hear that are all fires being fought these days, or is it just in drought conditions, or are a lot of these just, okay, we've got a hot spot, but let's see what happens to it? Like what's the protocol these days?
Yeah, there's definitely management decisions they make. Sometimes if it's in a wilderness area and they think it's not going to hurt, it's going to actually do the forest some good, they'll let the fire burn. And it's a tough business, because sometimes just like Yellowstone in '87, they let a lot of those fires go, but they didn't realize that it was going to get so hot and so dry the rest of the summer. So hindsight, they probably shouldn't have let those fires go. But on the other hand, some fires do really good work, but you don't want them to burn too hot. If it's a mosaic and it's a good fire, those are awesome. But every now and then, you get those fires that just are wind driven, and they just take out everything, and then almost scorch the soil, and so it's really tough for any vegetation to come back. So the fire business, just like California, what's going on there, it's a tough business, and hindsight, they should have done some more mitigation probably back in California, and done some controlled burns. But then you run into the environmental aspects of it too. Nobody in the springtime on a beautiful spring day, they don't want a bunch of breathing smoke. But on the other hand, now they're having to breathe smoke in a lot of places. So yeah, the fire business is a lot of second guessing, and a lot of, but there's quite a bit of science out there. But I said I'm kind of glad I'm not making those decisions right now, because it's there's a lot of hindsight there, and there's a lot of it's just a tough business, and a lot of politics involved as well.
Yeah, well, and it's really hard because you don't know. We've gotten pretty good at weather 5 days out, 7 days out even, but beyond that, there's no idea. So. Have you, you've been doing this for a long time now, so have you noticed these fires changing? Right now we've got this summer in Colorado, we had the biggest fire ever, and this that one up at Cameron Peak, that might get there too. So is it just random, or do you think there's the fires are just bigger and hotter than they used to be when you first got into firefighting?
Well, yeah, I think they are bigger and hotter than they were. There's definitely some global warming going on. I don't know if it's just a minuscule trend or what, but definitely, the last 10 years or so, it's been hotter and drier. So, whether that'll continue or not, I'm not sure. But definitely, and too, there's more people. There's more people in the urban interface. More people moving into the woods and more people starting fires. So there's just a lot of mitigating factors involved in it. And like I said, it's kind of. I'm glad I'm not making the decisions, and I can't really definitively say one way or the other exactly what's going on. But I do know that we've been pretty busy the last few years.
Yeah. When we get these fires and they'll say 121,733 acres, is it your plane that's coming up with that exact acreage? Or is that satellite? How's that work?
No, there's a couple. That's our planes doing that. Some will, what we can do is from the plane, we'll drop points around a fire with the camera using the camera, and then we'll save that perimeter as a polygon, and it does tell us 133.3 acres.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that is, it's great technology. But there's also a couple other planes that do similar things to us, but they have these fire scanners that they'll just fly. They can take a couple passes over the fire, and that'll give them the acreage too. They have to have an interpreter on the ground, kind of interpret where to put the fire lines around it. But those fly most fires every day if they can, and then we're kind of a supplement to that. Like if one of those planes is broken, or sometimes we can fly in the afternoon, and we can give them real time information. Like, it's like the military. The fire is divided up into different quadrants, like. Divisions, Division Zulu, Division Alpha, and we can actually look at Division Zulu and say, yeah, this fire in the last 2 hours has grown 220 acres. And then for their afternoon meeting at 5:00, they can kind of give their fire managers and the fire team some real time information and say, yeah, we really need to do something with Division Zulu. It's really gone and it's going up by the river. And so they can get some real-time information. So that's what we'll do. We'll kind of supplement those, the big planes, or the planes that do those IR flights. And we can do similar things, but it's a little bit different technology to get to the end product.
Well, as luck would have it, just a couple days ago, I was in Salida, and I decided to grab my bike and ended up quite randomly riding some trails by the Decker fire, which was burning pretty much this exact same time last year in 2019, late summer, early fall, whatever. And it's so interesting to ride there because it had only been a year, so I usually don't get to see that kind of stuff. But some points that you made. I mean, it's amazing. One hillside will be burnt, the next hillside will be, untouched, and then some of the soil things, everything seemed really prone to flooding. Like every little gully that you wouldn't even notice it looked like it had had a flash flood in the last year. So do you go in after some of these fires? Do you help with any of the restoration and some of that other kind of stuff?
Well, yeah, we definitely can. When they got the avalanches down by Lake City, winter before last, I think it was, we did some mapping there, and we did some videos and pictures kind of showing them where the rivers were plugged up and what was going on there. So we could give them real time information there too. And, they had a big mudslide. I don't know if you remember, it's probably 10 years now, over by Colburn. Killed a couple of county commissioners. We gave them some real time information on that and mapped it and pictures and videos. So these aircraft I work with are called multi-mission aircraft, the state of Colorado multi-mission aircraft. So we'll do even search and rescue with them. We'll do little bit of law enforcement, but not much. If we do any law enforcement, we have to have a law enforcement personnel on, and so our primary mission is fire, so we don't do that much. But we'll do, we've even gone out into the Eastern Plains when they've had blizzards and helped them pinpoint where vehicles are buried in the snow or partially buried in the snow. So we'll give them information about that too. And I guess one thing I can tell you, if you do get lost, start a fire, because we can find the fires. A couple of years ago, a guy climbed Mount Missouri up between Leadville and Buena Vista and was missing for several days, and they couldn't find him. So we went up there to look for him, and I guess he called his wife from the peak and said, "No, I'll be there later today or tonight," and he never showed up. So they wanted us to concentrate on kind of the peak in that area, thinking that it was like in the fall, and they had one early big storm. They thought maybe he slipped off and rolled down or something. So we we concentrated on the peak in that area where they kind of told us. We searched for a few hours, and we kind of just said, "Oh, let's look around." And we looked like 3 drainages over, and we spotted this little heat signature and zoomed in on it. And there was a guy there that matched the description, the clothing, and we found him, and he's probably 15 miles away from where they said he was, where they were looking for him. And so that was a success. We had a Black Hawk helicopter working up there, and we gave them the coordinates, and 10 minutes they picked him up, and he was out of there.
Wow. Huh.
So that was a pretty good success. And we like to do that. We like to help out people, and even on fires, a lot of times they'll use a road or barrier, like I was saying, and they'll do a burn where they kind of burn up to the road just to keep the fire from going over the road. Puts a barrier up when the fire moves at that road real hard. They've got a little fire barrier there, but obviously you have a chance of having a spot over the road, and in smoky conditions, it's really hard to see where those spots are. But we can, with the infrared, we can look through the smoke and see. We can't look through clouds if there's a lot of moisture there, but we can look through smoke. So in smoky conditions, we really are helpful to the firefighters, and we can tell them, "Oh yeah, you've got a spot over there, and it's at these coordinates," and they can go put out that spot. So that's where we get the biggest, joy of doing our job, is helping the people on the ground.
The firefighters, yeah. Well, one last fire question. So I've been around this area for close to 25 years, and as I'm knocking on wood, we haven't really seen a big forest fire in the Crested Butte or Gunnison area. That I can think of. Is it pure luck, or are forests in a little better shape, you think?
Well, I think we don't have as much bug kill, but we are at 9,000 feet, and there just aren't as many fires at 9,000 feet. Actually, I've seen a couple. There's one by Steamboat. The Williams Fork fire is burning up in the high country, and it's burning into the high basins, but it's kind of unusual. You just don't see that. The fires in the high country too much. And but I do remember there was a fire up by Spring Creek that burned probably 125 acres or so a while ago. That's just probably like 20 years ago. And you can still up Brush Creek, you can see some fire scars where they did have a high country fire up at Timbered Hill and that area towards Pearl Pass. There's a lot of dead burned trees up there. So that there was at least one season that they had a pretty good fire in the high country, but it is pretty unusual. I think they could probably definitely get a wind-driven fire up Taylor Canyon sometime. Those prevailing winds out of the west, if it got started, and there's not a lot of ground fuel there, but some of those fires, if they get started and go tree to tree, you can get some big fires, but you have to have a lot of wind and high temperatures and low humidities. but there's definitely some places, in Kebler Pass as well. I think into the right conditions, you could get a fire and have it burn down Kebler, with those west winds. But we are pretty fortunate around Crested Butte that we haven't had too many fires.
Let's hope that stays that way.
But I did have a fire this summer that we put some jumpers on up Mill Creek.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little lightning fire up there that I think it only went like 10 or 15 acres, but we did have one there.
That area seems, there's a lot of trees in that area too. I would think that could have gotten bad with the wrong wind.
One other thing we can do with our aircraft too is we can do air attack out of it, where we go into a little bit different profile, and we can actually coordinate the airspace over a fire, where the tankers, where the helicopters, and where they're dropping their retardant, where they're dropping their water. We can kind of coordinate with the ground and the aircraft where to do that, and that's called air attack. And so that's just another one of our missions we can do as well.
Nice. Well, it sounds like a really good career and really rewarding. So, well, let's start to wrap it up a little bit. Crested Butte is home for you and has been for a long time. So why Crested Butte?
Crested Butte's just, I think that one of the first times I went up north of Crested Butte and up by Gothic in that area, I hadn't seen any place as beautiful as that ever, and I know the corridors around Crested Butte are getting filled up with a lot of people, but you can still get away from those corridors and get some isolation. There's still a lot of beautiful places, but the Elk Mountains to me are as beautiful as any place in the United States. So pretty special place, Crested Butte.
Definitely. Is there anything I should have asked that you just want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think, I've been blessed kind of, with a career in firefighting and helicopter skiing and just skiing in general. I still ski every day in the winter, and I love to, whether it's downhill skiing or cross-country skiing, I still love the mountains and love to ski. And I think it's been really, awesome that I have that skill to do that. And now I just, I use it to keep fit and to keep healthy. And I think it's just the snow sports are just wonderful. And I've been blessed to have a great career in skiing and firefighting.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, the last question, who else should I interview?
Well, I was thinking of a few people, and I think you interviewed Dave Schieffer already, right?
I did. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, Dave Schieffer. I think there's Jeff Pike was pretty influential in the skiing industry in Crested Butte. And, obviously Rick Borkovic, if you can get a hold of him, he'll give you some, the exact way that, he started doing the telemark turn and backcountry skiing. I just talked to him the other day. He kind of does some missionary work overseas, but he was back in Colorado, and he would be a good one to interview as well.
Awesome.
And yeah, I could text you his phone number.
That'd be great. All right. Well, thanks so much. And hopefully these fires go out soon and it'll slow down a bit for the winter and you can just do some skiing.
Yeah, and hopefully that was informative to some people. But the way we fight fires is definitely changing, and the technology is, a lot of people didn't want to embrace that new technology because they said, well, why do we need that? We've been doing it this way forever, but I think as they see what the technology is doing, it's really helpful to the firefighters. So it's changing. Even though we're getting a lot more fires, we're also getting better technology as well.
And you've been doing it for a while. I'm sure when you were 20 or whatever it was, you would have been happy to have a plane telling you to run over and put out a little spot fire to keep it going. But he didn't have that probably. So, well, awesome. Again, thanks, and I will see you around.
All right. Sounds good, Frank.
All
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Crested Butte is Home podcast. All the episodes can be found at crestedbutteshome.com, where you can also subscribe on your favorite podcast player and also leave a review if you're so inclined. And you can also find my contact information and Crested Butte and Gunnison real estate information at crestedbutteshome.com. Thanks for listening, and I will be back in a couple weeks with another new episode.